the polls have been really bad for Biden. Okay.
They
Be
have.
clear. We've discussed Biden ain't going nowhere. It's Biden or bust. Nobody within their right mind would even want to jump in at this point. Okay. My concern with the way people react to the polls is just to be totally dismissive of them. And there are elements of different polls that sound completely absurd. But I was talking to my husband about this last night, and my dad actually, who was in town visiting, and
What up, Papa
I,
Carl?
hey, yeah,
Yeah.
hey, pops, and I just remember 2016. I was a poll truther. I was a, there's no motherfucking way that Trump is going to win. There's no way. There's no way. He's crazy. He's unserious. He's unqualified. Whoop de whoop whoop on down the line. And on the November election day, I went to bed early because I was like, hang it up, flat screen. It ain't happening, Cap. And I woke up and Donald Trump had won the presidency. I don't want to have that kind of delusion again about the warning signs that are there. I think that it's important to heed the warning signs in the polling. Even if you don't believe those will be the final numbers, even if you believe you're doing better than the polling, or people say, well, I didn't get polled, or well, people don't even answer polls and yet, regardless of what rationale that you want to have, I don't want to see the Democratic Party make the same mistake that I feel like many of us made. Michael, I remember Michael Moore asked, Bowling for Columbine was out there saying Trump is going to win. He's going to win Michigan. And one woman, I remember all these people that were saying the alarms, and a lot of us didn't listen. Now, maybe, maybe some people were like, a lot of
Wait,
people
one
did.
clarification,
Yeah.
Reese, but I want to make sure I understand. The polls had Hillary Clinton winning, and she lost, so the polls were wrong, right?
No, the polls were not entirely that Hillary would win. There were polls that did show Donald Trump winning. There were statewide polls that showed, that he could win. It was not.
I guess I was thinking. I'm thinking in October, the polls. If I got to double check it. I just remember them being really on Hillary Clinton's side,
there
especially after
were
grabbing by the pussy and all that kind of
Yeah,
stuff.
there was. I mean, I'm not saying that he was always leading or anything like that.
Right.
But what I'm saying is the polls were always close. It was never no 52-47 type of polling with Hillary. It was never nothing like that. It was always
Hmm.
close. And there were polls that were concerning. And every poll that was concerning was dismissed. Okay. And
Hmm.
so my whole point is, and I'm just going to speak for myself, I won't speak for anybody else. I will say that I was completely caught off guard, despite the fact that there were polls that indicated there was trouble, despite the fact that there were people in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania and Michigan that were saying, Hillary, you need to send some people out here. We need some money. Black people are not on your side. They're not going to vote. Yada yada yada. Despite all of these warning signs, they were not heeded. And so what I'm saying is I see the same pattern of behavior and how people are responding to these polls. And I think that's counterproductive because we're actually in a position with the election being 8 months from now to use the polls as instructive on where are our gaps? Where do we need to do more work? Where do we need to shore up our messaging? Where do we need to target our resources? Maybe don't try to get Florida back again. Maybe don't try to get Texas. Like, maybe you focus on those core states or whatever. All I'm saying is that the idea, there's no way that people are going to vote for Trump. And if they do, fuck them. This is what we deserve. Or there's no way that the polls are right. Instead of having that attitude, let's look at the polls and say, okay, we need to put more, the 26% number with Black people. Is Trump going to get 20% of the Black vote? Fuck no. But it's saying we got some work to do with Black voters, which I think we could agree, being on air, we could
Absolutely.
agree that that is the
Yeah.
case. So all I'm saying is I don't like the poll truthers. I don't like the polls are completely wrong. The only polls that count is election day because election day is too damn late to do anything about the numbers. You got to be working on all this shit for the next 8 months. So I'm curious, what's your thoughts on how people should be using these polls?
So, I feel different about this. I think that polls are crystal balls for pundits to act like they know the future. I
Hmm.
think that they work for a slow news day. Um, I'm going through several articles right now. July 2011 poll: Obama hits all-time low. That's
Right.
Politico. Um, the Guardian. This is, let me see here. May 2012. Obama hits low. Barack Obama will be seen by voters as the lesser of the two evils. I mean, I could go on and on as how much the polls were wrong with Obama, but a couple of key things here. I think that the polls, two things can be true. I do believe the polls are bullshit. They're historically wrong when it comes to black voters. But polls are not. Let's say the polls were on Biden's side. We
Hmm.
shouldn't take that seriously either.
Right.
I'm not saying that we should ever take polls seriously. The
Hmm.
Democratic Party must do the work to work and fight for each and every single vote. And that was a massive mistake that Hillary Clinton did, not
Hmm.
going to Michigan, not going to
Hmm.
Wisconsin like she
Hmm.
should have. But what I feel like what's happening now, these pundits are bored and they use the polls to put a narrative out there
Yeah. Oh, yeah. I
that,
agree.
oh, Trump is doing so well and this is happening and Biden's falling apart and it's his age and they hate his age and whatever, whatever. What we have seen with special elections and the midterms, the votes tell us that the polls aren't accurate. I mean, the polls were insanely wrong during the 2022 midterms. They were calling for a red. Remember the red tsunami? Didn't
The
didn't.
polls weren't wrong. The pundits were wrong, but the polls were not.
But the pundits were quoting the polls. Remember
The
the shock? Like, oh my gosh. So I'm not saying ignore what needs to be done, but I am saying that I think these polls oftentimes do more harm than good. And I think
hmm.
sometimes they are suppressing votes. You know, narrative and messaging in media is so important.
Yes,
And
I
with
agree.
the messaging, Reese, they always attach a poll. A poll said, a poll said.
Right, right, right. I agree.
And I'm not saying that you and I are pollsters, but we are on radio. Gosh, what's three times? I'm on radio 20 hours a week. You're on
Hmm.
radio how many hours? 8 hours a week or something like that.
Yeah, something like
Um,
that. Hmm.
even when I was on Ricky Smiley's show and I saw the feedback and I said, wow, this is kind of the opposite of what I'm seeing in the polls. So I stand by that the polls are not helpful either way, whether they're good or bad.
Yes.
And Democrats have to do the work despite the polling.
Yes.
Because maybe part of the reason why Hillary didn't do the work is because she believed the polls.
Hmm.
You know what
Hmm.
I'm saying? I mean, remember the language? There's a blue wall in
Yeah.
Michigan.
Oh, yeah, yeah,
There's a
yeah.
blue wall in Wisconsin. And then also, just for me, from a logical perspective, like, how are these polls done? What time of the day are you calling people? Who are you asking? I don't know. I don't feel like it's helpful, and I put no stock in it. But I agree with you 1,000% that we still must do the work. And I'm not saying Democrats have no issue with
Yeah.
black voters, but I'm tired of black men being blamed when there's a minor loss.
Yeah, I agree. I agree.
I'm tired of black folks being blamed if so and so loses. So yeah, I think we're saying the same thing at the end of the day. But if you put stock in any of the polls, good or bad, I think that now always do the work, always do the work. But stock in the polls, uh, just show me when they've been right.
Well, okay, to be clear, I'm not a live by the polls or die by the polls person, but I think
Right.
that there is a perception that the polls have been more wrong than is actually accurate. Like the polls have not generally been wrong. The polls generally have been correct. Now you picked out a couple of articles where there were a couple of negative polls, but I've looked at on Wikipedia, you can look at general election polling, 2020, 2016, whatever,
Well, there's also
2012.
so many polls. That's a
Yeah,
good
there are a
point.
lot of
There's so
polls.
many. Quinnipiac, yeah.
Yeah, there are a lot of different polls, right? Now, I've looked at Obama's polling in 2012. Almost every poll, there may have been a handful out of like, I looked at over 100 and it went back all the way to this time period that we're looking at right now. Obama led in a vast majority of those polls. Now, to be fair, in 2016, Hillary did win the popular vote. So the polls were accurate in terms of the national polling because she did beat Donald Trump by 3 million votes. In 2020, Biden never fell behind Donald Trump. And if we look at some of the 2022 elections, where, for instance, Stacey Abrams never led Brian Kemp, a lot of these races that people wanted to believe were competitive didn't stand a chance, you know? So the polling usually doesn't get you to 100%. It's like 47, 43. Well, we know the end result is going to be adding up to 100%. So the polling doesn't necessarily give you the final result. There is room, margin of error, and then somebody is going to beat the polls, right? But I don't think that the polls have been as off base. And that's not just me saying this. These are people who study the polls who would say the same thing. And so my whole point is that people in dismissing the polls often say what you just said. Well, you know, the polls were wrong here, their polls were wrong there. And it was like, but when you go back and actually look at the data, you won't see that the polls were wrong. Now, 2022 Republican polling, they had flooded junk polls, and those were wrong. But pundits don't make polls. Pundits can be off. Sometimes I'm off. Sometimes we're all off. They do use polls to drive narratives. I 100% agree with that. I've said the same thing, particularly with primaries and how they suppress
Yeah.
certain people's fundraising, etc. But I'm just saying, if we have 8 months, we're seeing polling that is unlike anything we've seen, not just for Biden, but for any of the past winning and even slightly losing presidential candidates. And I think it's foolish to just say the polls are wrong. And I think it's foolish to just say, well, this is a conspiracy and this is just the media wanting a horse race. I think people should really, and it's not to say dump Biden. Again, Biden or bust. It's to
Right.
say we have work to do. There are vulnerabilities in our coalition that we need to shore up. I would still rather be Biden, even if he's behind in some polls, he's ahead in some polls. I would still rather be Biden than 91 count having twice impeached Donald Trump, who owes $500 million in damn civil judgments. But I think we are going to be in a bad position if we're sitting in September and October and we're like, oh shit, the polls still suck. What are we going to do? Like, let's fix these issues now while we still have time to fix them.
No, listen, I think we see it differently, but I agree. I think we have to fix these issues. And again, if the polls were on Biden's side, I would be saying ignore those damn polls.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You
I'm
know, you
same,
got
same,
work to do.
yeah, same.
Yeah. So we have to. He has to find better messaging. There's Gaza. There's a lot. So I agree. I mean, I have to go back and look at the numbers, Reese. But I mean, you know what I like to do? I never forget when the polls have Michael Bloomberg winning.
Michael
Remember
Bloomberg
the
winning
polls had
what?
Biden they winning the primary. Remember that?
Oh, oh,
Remember when the polls had Biden? I don't never forget the language. Biden is dead in the water during the primaries.
yes.
I mean, I've seen them, and what I sometimes like to do after an election, I will go back and look at what the polls said and see the recent poll filling George Santos' seat. They
Uh-huh.
had this tight race.
Yeah.
He won by like 8 points. I forgot the guy's name.
Well, that's the
I
thing
mean,
because it doesn't add up. The polls don't add up to 100. But let me just make one more point. I remember
mhm,
2020. I was doing a live, doing my predictions for not just the presidential race, but for the Senate, you know.
mhm.
And I had been looking at the polls the week before. I was like, shit, we might get to 57, 58. But then I did a live a couple of days before, and I was like, fuck, these polls are looking much worse. Like, it doesn't, it was looking like we weren't going to get Iowa. It was looking like we weren't going to get, I forgot another one. The white women was losing, Joni Ernst, whoever was up against Joni Ernst, and then it was another white woman somewhere that lost. And I was like, oh, okay, this ain't looking too good, and the because I was paying attention when it came out and these people lost, I was like, that is what the polls was saying, and it nosedived kind of at the end there when you have less undecideds. And so it was looking good. It was looking like 56, 57 senators, and then we ended up with a 50-50 Senate. So I've seen where maybe it looks good until it doesn't, or sometimes it looks bad until it doesn't either. It can go either way, but I just want people to let's dissect. I'm not saying take it wholesale, but I'm saying let's dissect what the polls are telling us so that we can adjust and react and bring our coalition back into the fold, because I do think that there are serious cracks that could cost us the election if we just let it be how it is right now.
I agree. I agree. There are serious cracks. Things can't be ignored. We can't think that some of the great wins that happened under this administration are going to resonate. People don't pay attention. People are not engaged. So I agree. I think we're on the. I think we're on the. I think we're on the same page, and maybe there's a happy medium that we can get to.